want their gun rights restored, it's good to have it in the order specifically, gun rights restored. Okay? Or, okay. So that's a statute. Now, there's one for sex trafficking, a special one for sex trafficking victims. A legislator from Tucson named Victoria Steele got this through. It has to do with sex trafficking victims who are convicted of prostitution. This is better than the general set-aside statute because it really does more, if you notice that third bullet. Okay, court discretion. Juvenile. Well, you may say, oh, well, what do we need this for? Juvenile records, they're not public. No. That's the old days. Remember the old days? No. They're public. I can go down to juvenile court and I can get records, for anybody. They're public. Okay? Now, maybe not every single document that relates to that child is public, but generally the record. So there are provisions where a person, you can get their juvenile adjudication set aside. You can get a destruction of juvenile records, so you really want to do both of these. There's also a statute where a person has been a juvenile but tried as an adult and convicted. Like a 15-year-old tried as an adult, convicted, ends up in the state prison or whatever. There's a special set-aside statute for that, and they even use the word expungement in it, so it's even better than the general set-aside statute. But this only applies if the person received probation. As if they received a prison sentence, that would not apply, and they would just have to go under the regular set-aside statute. Okay. I know I'm going through some of this quickly, so if you have any questions at some point. Okay. Remember I said, okay, federal convictions. We talked about restoration of rights based on a federal conviction. State court judge cannot set aside a federal conviction. They have no authority to set it aside. So you can't ask a Maricopa County Superior Court judge to set aside a federal conviction. There is no statutory authority for federal judges to do it, even though some have. And here I talk about presidential pardons, which is really the only thing they can do. But even a presidential pardon doesn't wipe out a conviction. And remember, the president can only grant a pardon for federal convictions, not state convictions. State convictions, you get a pardon from the governor. And we have a procedure for that in the state. Okay, this is an interesting statute. And we have used it not often. But where someone has been wrongfully arrested, charged, or indicted, they can apply under the statute to have what's their record, both their court records and any law enforcement records, cleared. Well, what does cleared mean? Well, it's probably better than a set-aside, but what does it mean? But what's good about it is the records cannot be released except by court order. So that means if someone wanted to get those court records where it's been cleared under the statute, they have to go before a judge and get an order. A lot of people wouldn't do that, or wouldn't know how to do it. This statute was probably passed for the situation where the cops were supposed to arrest Jack Doe, but by mistake they arrested John Doe. John Doe was wrongfully arrested. Arrest records are there. I can tell you they can hurt people. Employers will look at them. I get calls again from people who are denied things, and they say, I haven't even been convicted of anything. I was, yes, arrested 10 years ago, but the charges were ultimately dismissed. I just have an arrest record. It's on your criminal record. You can't really get it off unless you can show you were wrongfully arrested, charged, or indicted. Now, this doesn't have to do with a conviction. This has to do just with someone who can show that they're wrongfully arrested. So these are on the record. As a matter of fact, we have 3 cases going right now of, I can't believe it, this happened to 3 different people. where someone was arrested, either a friend or a relative. When they were arrested, they used our client's name. So what happens? Our client's name appears as an AKA, also known as, on the records, the indictment, the conviction, all of that. So every time they do a criminal background check on our client, this comes up and they say, you have a conviction. You know, here it is. It came up right here. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to get it removed, the AKA. You know, they had nothing to do with it. They weren't involved in the offense. It's just that someone used their name, and so their name came up as an AKA, and when you run a criminal background check, AKAs come up as well. So if you're an AKA on any case, it's going to come up if they ran a criminal background check. So, so that, you know, it's a very, you know, the things that happen to people are, okay. Designations, another thing we do that, again, you can do, and I think Maricopa County even has a form for designations. What are designations? In Arizona, we have 6 classes of felonies. Class 1 being the most serious, like first-degree murder, class 1 felony, all the way down to class 6. Class 6 is the least serious of felonies. Everybody who is charged in Arizona of a felony wants to plead to a class 6. Why? First of all, probation's always available. Doesn't mean they're going to get it, but if you're convicted of a class 6 probation's available. If you are convicted of a class 6 and you get probation, the judge at the sentencing, instead of designating it a felony, can keep it what's called undesignated, or sometimes you'll hear the term open. Class 6 open or a class 6 undesignated. And the theory is that if they successfully complete probation, then when the judge discharges them, they at that time designate it. And the idea is, you know, if they've done well on probation, it will be designated a misdemeanor, a class 1 misdemeanor. Or, it can be designated a felony. If it's classified as a class 1 misdemeanor, what does that mean? They don't lose any civil rights. So what we do is we ask for it to be designated a class 1 misdemeanor, and at the same time, we ask for it to be set aside. Misdemeanors can be set aside, remember, like felonies. Now, why do we get these if at the time of discharge from probation, the judge is supposed to do something? Well, a lot of times judges don't. Why? Person owes money. I know I'm going to collect this money. You pay your money, come back to me. I'll designate it a misdemeanor, the little carrot. Or there's an oversight. You know, they just didn't do it. Something of that. So we get cases where a person was convicted many years ago, but is still undesignated. So what we do is we try to get it designated a misdemeanor, and at the same time to get it set aside. And Maricopa County does have a designation form to get a class, and it's only class 6s that can be designated a misdemeanor. If someone comes in and says, I was convicted under class 5 and I want to get it designated a misdemeanor, no. Now, if they're given a class 6 undesignated and put on probation and they violate probation and probation's revoked and they're given a prison sentence, the judge at that time has to designate it a felony. Why? Because you cannot sentence anyone to prison in Arizona if on a misdemeanor. Everyone in prison has at least, they may have misdemeanor convictions, but has at least one felony conviction. Okay, so designations. Okay, fines, fees, and restitution. Okay, I will admit, when I started doing this work, I didn't really realize that this would become an issue. But it's a major issue. Because no one that I can see goes through the criminal justice system, at least in the superior court, without getting some kind of assessment. For instance, if they're given a court-appointed attorney, sounds like it should be free, right? Well, most judges at the end of the case or at some point will assess attorney's fees. I don't know what they do here so much, and again in Pima County it's usually $400. Now that's obviously not going to, I mean, that person can't go out onto the and hire a criminal defense attorney for $400 for any offense. But, so it's reasonable in that way, but it's still attorney's fees. It's a fee. There are lots of different fees. For instance, if a person's given a fine, and usually people only get fines where they're mandatory. Where are they mandatory? Many of the drug offenses have mandatory fines, and DUIs have mandatory fines. Most judges, at least state court judges, don't fine people where it's not mandatory. At least that's been our experience. Okay, so what we try to do is to get fees and fines waived. Now, also with fines, waived or reduced. Also with fines are what are called surcharges. Another way of just getting money. Someone could have a $1,000 fine and a $750 surcharge. Surcharges can be are waivable even if they're connected to a mandatory fine. Now, like I said, I don't know whether in Maricopa County those, the commissioner or whoever handles the case would ever waive or reduce a fee or a fine, but we get them waived or reduced all the time. Our biggest success was we had a client who had a $130,000 drug fine, and even though there's probably a question of whether it's waivable, I mean, we asked for everything. Judge waived it. $130,000 fine, waived it. Saved that client $130,000. Now, I'll get to your question one thing. Restitution. Restitution, what that is, of course, is where there is a victim of the offense who has been harmed, either physically harmed or property taken, can go into court when the person has been convicted and ask the court to order restitution. The court collects it and passes it on to the victim. Once restitution is set, judges really have no authority to vacate it or reduce it because it's not, the court doesn't get it. They just collect it. It's really the victim's money. Now the victim could waive it. The problem is you can't really make contact with victims anymore unless you go through the prosecutor. So it's not so you can't just call up a victim. Well, I mean, maybe as non-lawyers you can. As a lawyer, I can't. Okay. There's a thing called a criminal restitution order that judges will take money that's owed and make it into what's called, it's not just dealing with restitution, it's dealing with anything that is owed. It's just it's a statutory mechanism to collect money. So if a conviction is set aside and they put a criminal restitution order in place, they can use that mechanism to collect money that's owed. It's like a civil judgment, but it's better for the state than a civil judgment. Okay, I think that's it. So I've thrown a lot of things at you. You have, even though it's hard to read, the copy of the slides. But if you have, as I said, if you have any questions or problems, feel free to contact me or contact Sandra and she can contact me. Now, what is it you should be doing? In Tucson, and I think they have them here periodically, we have a workshop. I mean, we represent people in this process, but we also have a workshop 3 times a year where we assist people who are willing to represent themselves, but we assist them in filling out the court forms. And we do this in conjunction with a couple organizations in Tucson, excuse me, including the clerk's office of the Superior Court. Why is it good to get them involved? Because they then will come to the workshop, set up their computer, and be able to access court information. And because even though the forms are easy to fill out, you still need some court information unless the person has documents. Most of these people don't. Now, you can help people fill out forms. You don't have to be a lawyer. I didn't bring the Maricopa County forms, but I'm sure Sandra can get you. And you will see they're not very difficult to fill out. Now, you can't represent them. You can't put your name on the form. You can't sign it unless you're a lawyer. If there is a hearing, you can go with them, but you can't represent them. But you can assist them in filling out the forms. You can even fill it out for them, actually fill it out. And you can help them get it filed. You can help them get a certificate of absolute discharge. You can help them through the whole process other than actually representing them as a lawyer would. And at these workshops, we help anywhere from 75 to 100 people in an afternoon. Now, we have a lot of people who volunteer, not just our students. We get lawyers, non-lawyers to volunteer. But I'll tell you, you put out the word, you think this room is big? I'm going to tell you, they're going to be packed in this room. And we've been doing this for years, and we still get 75 to 100. Here, you'd probably get more. You'd pack this room.
Is there criteria in getting the clerk of the court?
No, you just, no, I mean, when we started our clinic, the clerk of the court was very supportive of us, of this program. So, I can't say what they would do here at the clerk's office. You'd have to kind of figure out how to handle that, how to do with that. But, people, first of all, you'd be amazed how many people have criminal convictions. I'm going to tell you, it's a lot. My son was in prison for 5 years in the state of Arizona. So it's not just, low-income people. It goes across the line. Now, obviously, there's certain groups of people that are hit up more than others, but still, it goes across the board. And they just don't know how to deal with the system. And so if you want to really do something, try to put together a workshop. And remember, even though your interest may be primarily voting, remember, you're really going to be helping them in a lot of ways, not just to get their voting rights back, but maybe to get their conviction set aside or get their Class 6 undesignated designated as a misdemeanor. So there's a lot of things you can do for them that is going to help them, including voting.
The Office of the Public Advocate in Maricopa County.
Yeah, that's the one that does it. They have a workshop.
4 workshops a year.
They have 4?
Yeah.
Oh, well, hook up with them. Maybe that's the easiest. Volunteer with them.
Office of the Public
Yeah.
Advocate, so they're doing 4, and I'll give you all the list of the workshops, and I'm in the process of contacting them right now.
Yeah. Now, I don't know, right, thank you. That's the agency that does it here. So, you could volunteer with them. And you've been trained, see, you know now all the stuff that's available. The only thing you haven't looked at yet, or maybe you have, is the Maricopa County forms. But they're not that hard to fill out. It's just some basic information they're asking for, except I do recommend, if it's true they don't hold hearings anymore, or don't hold hearings, is that the person attaches to it a statement about themselves, like, I've got my GED, I'm now you know, a student at Phoenix College, you know, et cetera, that kind of stuff.
If people are interested, I was involved with a program that worked with women getting out of the system in Perryville.
No, right, there is.
This was a few years ago, but the program is still available. I've talked with them saying, hey, I'd like to get back involved.
Okay.
And they said they have programs. They work with 100 women a year. This could be, I don't want to say a safe area, but if anyone wants to
Right.
help me get this started.
So you might be able to hook up with other organizations that are doing this so you don't have to create it yourself. The only thing I would say is if you did create it yourself, I bet you'd get a big crowd. I mean, you know, what I'm saying is they all get big crowds. But, you know, so that's clearly something. The other thing you can do is you can push employers to ban the box. City of Phoenix is a ban the box employer. Tempe is, Glendale is, state of Arizona is now. But a lot, you know, private employers, Walmart, Target. Target was such into this that they actually in Minnesota, where they're headquartered, they supported and lobbied for a bill in the legislature. Bed Bath & Beyond, Party City, some of those are because they were sued and they agreed to ban the box. So you can push with private employers to ban the box. The other thing you can do is push you know, with landlords to do away with the crime-free addendums on their leases, you know. So those are two advocacy things, you know, that you might want to think about doing that can, again, you know, it may not get directly their voting rights back, but can really help people. Yes?
So you suggested that there are many more denials in Maricopa County.
Well, that's my perception. I mean, the public advocate people can probably tell you better than me.
And so is there a way of addressing that? How
Well-
would one speak about?
Well, you know, what you could do, and you probably would want to talk to some lawyers about it first, you might want to set up a meeting with the presiding judge of the Superior Court and say, hey, Judge, if this is still the way they do it, you want to check it out first. Hey, Judge, you're not following the statute. You are not in compliance with either the restoration of rights or the set-aside statute. It says the sentencing judge or his or her successor. It doesn't say a commissioner handles them all. That's not the law. Now, is that going to help people? I don't know. I can't tell you. Except that, you know, obviously there's going to be some judges who are real into this, that are going to start getting them. And you may get some judges who are not really into this, that are going to start getting them. So I can't tell you. That's why you got to talk to lawyers in the community that, you know, like at the public advocates, and see what they recommend. But that might be, you know, the way to do it is like set up a meeting. There's a presiding judge of the Maricopa County Superior Court.
Last question?
Yeah. Okay.
Is there, do either of you guys know of any sort of friendly people at the State House who would listen to getting some of these legislatures and all legislation?
So right now, that's part of session 1 that we did.
Oh,
So
okay.
we have 3 different working groups working together, and that's what, as soon as we have the last question, we're gonna go into what work still needs to be done on the education advocacy, which is like the clinic, you know, workshop piece, and the policy piece. So if there are no other questions.
Yeah, I can just say a couple things about that. There is a group, I'm not on it, but the Arizona Supreme Court actually came out with a very good report in the last year about a lot of different things within the criminal justice system. But they have put together a group, their lobbyist has put together, a guy named Jerry Landau, has put together a group of, I think mainly lawyers, but I don't know if it's entirely lawyers, to try to put some teeth in the set-aside statute. I mean, to propose legislation that would put some teeth. And I understand they're in the process of maybe doing some drafting. I don't know exactly what's happening, but that's something out there. The other thing is there have been attempts about voting rights, to automatically give, a lot of states, once you complete your sentence, you automatically get your voting rights back. You may not get your other civil rights, but you get your voting rights. And so there's been some, attempts in the legislature here. The problem is, I don't know if this is true, but I think one of the problems is Republicans perceive that people with criminal conviction are more likely to vote Democratic than Republican. Now, I don't know if that's true. To me, there's going to be conservative people with criminal convictions, liberal people with criminal convictions, whatever. But I think that's what they perceive. So they will fight anywhere in the country the voting rights to try to expand it. They want to limit it as much as they can because they think they're in a better position if people with felony convictions or criminal convictions can't vote. I don't know if that's true, but that's what a lot of Republicans perceive. So it makes it harder in our legislature because it's Republican controlled, the governor's Republican, to get a voting right. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. I think hopefully it'll happen at some point. Yeah.
Didn't you say the Koch brothers still are behind reentry?
Well, you're right.
Are they excluding that in?
No, I don't know if they are, actually. Good question. I don't know if they are. They're libertarians. That's what they are. And so, libertarians hate the government, think the government is bad. And so, they, I don't know for sure, but I've never seen anything with their name on it excluding voting rights. But I don't know for sure. Yeah. Okay, very good. Well, I think it's great you're all here and all interested in doing this. You're going to be helping a group of people that really are in desperate need of assistance in all different ways. And, it really helps us. If people don't reoffend, then we are the winners, as well as the person who might have reoffended. And the more barriers we put in front of them, the more likelihood they're going to reoffend. So if we can knock down these barriers, we're helping ourselves and we're saving money. We don't have to, all the stuff that costs when someone commits a crime. So power to you all. Continue doing what you're doing, and I'm happy to help you in any way I can.